Well, we're joined by Derek Ray and Clive Allen. These guys will be commentating tonight here at Cheltenham against Hereford in the FA Cup. And, well, you've got to work together, haven't you? Derek, you're a seasoned professional as a commentator. How does it work, the relationship between a commentator and his co-commentator? The co-commentator tends to be an ex-pro as well, so how does it work?
It's probably a bit like a good midfield playmaker and a striker. You have to have that working relationship, you have to have that understanding, but the jobs are different. That's the main thing. My job is mainly to identify, to perhaps amplify a little bit. Clive's job is to give the ex-players perspective and to point out things that mere commentators can't necessarily see, because our job is a bit more fundamental. So it is teamwork. That's what it comes down to, teamwork.
And I guess the viewer wants to hear from you what's happening, but they want to hear probably more from the ex-pro about why it happened.
Exactly. You've summed it up. I think you've been here before.
And Clive, for you, it's I guess knowing when to speak and when not to speak.
Yes, that's right. I think quite normally you would take the replays on any of the action. Obviously Derek does most of the speaking and most of the information comes from him. But I think it's for me to give an insight into one or two things that happen in the game that maybe people don't pick up on. A spinning ball or something that comes off, deflects off of someone and goes in. Just to try to explain exactly what's happened, why someone's blasted the ball over the crossbar, and then obviously the incredible pieces of skill that we see at times and the spectacular goals, hopefully, that we will see tonight. Now,
there's a certain art to television commentary. It's different from radio commentary, where you've really got to paint the picture with words, but with TV, the viewer can see for themselves, can't they? So what's the difference, Derek?
You're always striking a balance on television. On the radio, as you've said, you as the commentator are the picture. On television, the picture is already painted. So what you're trying to do is, in a sense, get out of the way, but at the same time still point out what's necessary. A game like Cheltenham Town against Hereford United, there'll be committed people watching, supporters of both clubs, but there will also be a lot of neutrals who perhaps are not familiar with Cheltenham Town, maybe don't know who the key midfield players are for Hereford United. So it's more about that, and it's being careful that as a commentator you're not just restating what the viewer can already see.
Now, Clive, be honest, when you were a pro, I don't know what you thought about people like Derek and commentators, but now you're on the other side of the fence. Is it as easy as you thought it would be? It probably is now, because you've been doing it for a while. But what's your sort of view of this job now that you're doing it yourself?
Well, fortunately for me, football's a way of life. I was born into it, and it's something that I've always enjoyed. I love talking about it. I think, as Derek rightly says, you don't tell people what they can see, but what you're trying to do is give them insight into maybe things that they don't quite understand, the tactical situation of the game, why a manager makes a particular substitution or moves a player into a different position, and the way the course of the game's going, how you just have a feel for what's happening in the football match, and I think you're trying to convey those thoughts to the public and give them another insight into the game.
Now, at an FA Cup match, obviously, Derek, FA Cup is, well, we'll talk to Mr. Allen in a minute about what the FA Cup means to him and his family, but it's a special tournament still, isn't it? And for these two clubs, there's a third round tie against Everton waiting, so it's a big old night.
I think that over the last few years we've heard people say, well, the FA Cup doesn't mean as much as it used to, but I'm not really buying it, because when you come to a place like Cheltenham, when you come to Warden Road, you see that it does actually mean an awful lot to the people here. And I lived in the States for a number of years and worked for ESPN out there covering the FA Cup off tube, from a studio. And I would watch the pre-match pictures from venues like this, and I'd be insanely jealous of the broadcasting colleagues who had the privilege back then of covering the games, because you just wanted to be there and you wanted to be a part of it. And yes, you could say that that the heyday of the FA Cup might have been many years ago. This man here, of course, experienced quite a few big-time FA Cup games including a final. But there's no substitute for the early rounds. You know, I still think there's magic to be found in these early rounds of the FA Cup, and you know, we'll see tonight. We'll see what it means to Cheltenham. We'll see what it means to Hereford, and not just because Everton will be the opponents of the victorious team tonight. Even if it were Accrington Stanley, it's still the FA Cup. It's still the greatest domestic cup competition of them all.
Well, Clive, this could take a couple of hours, but perhaps you could briefly explain the Allen history with the FA Cup, and indeed even with Cheltenham Town.
Yeah, well, firstly, magic is definitely the word for me. There is a magic about the FA Cup ever since I had the fortune of playing in it from a 17-year-old. And I always remember senior players saying, come on boys, make sure we get a result today. You don't get too many chances at this competition. It's not like a league programme. You get one chance each season, and when you're out, you're out. And so it is magical. I get a little tingle even being here tonight with the prospect of what these two teams face, an FA Cup tie with the prospect of a massive game against Everton. For me, I have a family history with the competition. My father played and won in 61 with Spurs. My cousin in 80 with West Ham, being the youngest player to play in an FA Cup final. I had the pleasure of playing in 2 FA Cup finals, unfortunately losing both of them, but great memories of the runs to get there, the drama on the way, scoring a semi-final winner for Spurs, a semi-final winner for Queen's Park Rangers to take us to the final in '82 against Tottenham. It's just magic. That is the word for me, and I think we'll see that again tonight with two teams totally committed, two teams who all the league form, everything goes out the window. It's a one-off. It's just a very, very special occasion. And
we know you and your family for Spurs, QPR, etc. But there's a link to even Cheltenham Town with the Allen dynasty, isn't there?
Yes, there is. It's fabulous to be here tonight. My uncle was a general manager here many years back. He played for Charlton, Bournemouth, and played abroad in Belgium as well. But was general manager here for 5 years. And then my cousin was here for on a couple of occasions as manager. So again, there's lots of connections, and I think Cheltenham will be the favourites going into tonight's game, and it will be fantastic for them to progress. We had an FA Cup tie against them last season when I was coach at Spurs, and had a really difficult game at White Hart Lane before we run out victors. So I know how important it is for every single person connected with both clubs this evening.
And finally, Derek, we're all of a certain age, unfortunately, where Hereford United, it was a long time ago, but you still associate that club, don't you, with a win and a goal?
It's going to be that way forever. I think it's unavoidable. It doesn't really matter what age you are. I think even if you weren't old enough, and sadly I'm old enough to remember it, but even if you're 25 or 30, you've grown up hearing stories about the FA Cup and Hereford United and what they did back in the early 70s. And everyone knows the names of Ronnie Radford and Ricky George and Colin Addison, of course. And, Hereford United remain to this day pillars of the FA Cup. It's in the club's DNA, no getting away from it.
Finally, Clive, we were talking off air about how difficult it is for any sportsman to retire from sport and try and find something to replicate the buzz of playing sport. Well, the answer is you can't, but doing what you do, get some way towards it at least.
Yes, it is a substitute for it, I have to say, and I do get, as I said earlier, a real tingle, a real buzz about being here tonight in the situation of co-commentating on an FA Cup tie. It is a fantastic feeling. There is no substitute for actually playing, pulling on a shirt and going out, crossing the white line and playing in an FA Cup tie, but this is a good second.
Gentlemen, have a great night.
Thank you.